The phone rang at 3:47 a.m. Not my cell phone, the secure landline that hadn't made a sound in 3 years. When I heard the voice on the other end say, "Operative Phoenix, this is Pentagon Command," my father's mocking laughter from dinner that night suddenly didn't seem so funny anymore. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up as Sarah Chen in suburban Denver, I learned early that being different wasn't always celebrated. My mother, Dr. Elena Chen, was a linguistics professor at the University of Colorado, and our house was a symphony of languages. Russian drifted from the kitchen during breakfast, Mandarin echoed through homework sessions, and Arabic whispered through bedtime stories. By age 12, I was fluent in 7 languages: English, Spanish, French, German, Russian, Mandarin, and Arabic. My father, Robert Mitchell, saw this as nothing more than an expensive hobby. A mechanical engineer who built his career on practical solutions and tangible results, he couldn't understand why anyone would waste time learning to speak to people we'd never meet anyway. Every parent-teacher conference ended the same way, Mom beaming with pride while Dad checked his watch and muttered about real skills. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I'd just received a full scholarship to Georgetown's School of Foreign Service, and Mom had prepared a celebration dinner. As she excitedly explained my acceptance letter in 3 different languages to our international neighbors who'd stopped by, Dad sat in stony silence. 7 languages, he finally said, cutting through Mom's joyful chatter. You know what that gets you in the real world, Sarah? A job at the airport asking if people want peanuts or pretzels. The room fell quiet. Our neighbors exchanged uncomfortable glances. I've been supporting this linguistic circus for 18 years, thinking maybe it would lead somewhere. But face it, you're going to spend 4 years at an overpriced school learning to have conversations that don't matter, with people who don't matter. Mom's face flushed red, but she bit her tongue. She'd learned long ago that arguing with Dad about my languages only made things worse. I excused myself and spent the rest of the evening in my room, wondering if maybe he was right. Maybe I was just the girl who collected languages like some people collected stamps. Impressive to show off, but ultimately useless. Georgetown changed everything. Professor Catherine Walsh, a former State Department official, recognized something in me during her Introduction to International Relations course. After class one day, she approached me with an unusual request. Sarah, I've been watching your participation in discussions, and I'm curious about your language background. I rattled off my 7 languages, expecting the usual polite nod. Instead, her eyes lit up. Have you ever considered government service? The question caught me off guard. Government service seemed like something for people with political science degrees and family connections, not linguistics majors from Colorado. But Professor Walsh explained that the world was changing rapidly, and the government desperately needed people who could navigate multiple cultures and languages with native-level fluency. There's a program, she said carefully, a selective recruitment initiative for students with exceptional linguistic abilities. It's not advertised, and it's not for everyone, but someone with your skills. She trailed off, studying my face. Would you be interested in learning more? 3 weeks later, I found myself in a nondescript office building in Virginia, taking tests I couldn't have imagined. Not just language proficiency exams, though those were rigorous enough, but psychological evaluations, cultural adaptation scenarios, and problem-solving exercises that pushed my multilingual brain in ways I'd never experienced. The final interview was conducted by a woman who introduced herself only as Agent Rodriguez. She spoke to me in rapid succession, English, then Arabic, then Mandarin, then Russian, switching not just languages but entire cultural contexts with each transition. I found myself naturally adapting, not just translating words but shifting my entire mindset to match each linguistic framework. Impressive, she said in perfect German. Most people can speak multiple languages. Very few can actually think about them. She leaned forward. We're not looking for translators, Sarah. We're looking for bridges. I didn't hear back for 6 months. During that time, I threw myself into my studies, trying to forget about the mysterious interview and focus on normal college life. Dad's words echoed in my head during every linguistics seminar, every cultural studies assignment. Maybe this was all just an elaborate way to avoid facing the fact that my languages really were just an expensive hobby. Then, on a rainy Thursday in October, Professor Walsh approached me after class again. This time, she handed me a sealed envelope with no return address. "Congratulations," was all she said. The letter inside was brief and official. I'd been selected for a classified training program that would begin immediately after graduation. No details about location, duration, or specific duties. Just a phone number to call and a date to report. When I called home to share the news, keeping details vague as instructed, Mom was ecstatic. Dad's response was predictably dismissive. "Government work," he scoffed. "Let me guess. They want you to translate documents that no one will ever read for bureaucrats who don't understand them anyway. Well, at least it's a paycheck." The training program began 3 days after my Georgetown graduation ceremony. Quantico was unlike anything I'd experienced. Part military base, part university, part something I couldn't quite identify. For 6 months, 16 other recruits and I were immersed in intensive courses that went far beyond language skills. We learned cryptography, cultural intelligence analysis, psychological profiling, and advanced communication techniques. We studied geopolitical dynamics, religious extremism, international economics, and regional conflicts. Most importantly, we learned how to become invisible, how to blend seamlessly into any culture, any situation, any conversation. My linguistic abilities weren't just useful here, they were essential. While other recruits struggled with the multilingual components of our training, I found myself naturally excelling. Not because I could speak the languages, but because I could think like a native speaker in each one. The Russian mindset isn't just about vocabulary and grammar. It's about understanding the cultural weight of directness, the importance of relationships over transactions, the historical skepticism toward authority. The Arabic perspective encompasses religious nuances, family honor concepts, and communication styles that go far beyond literal translation. Each language carried its own worldview, and I was learning to access all of them simultaneously. Our instructors, who never shared their real names or backgrounds, began referring to us by operational code names. Mine was Phoenix, a designation I initially assumed was random until Instructor Martinez explained it during a particularly challenging exercise. "The Phoenix rises from ashes," he said, as I successfully navigated a complex multilingual negotiation scenario. "But more importantly, it transforms completely while retaining its essential nature. That's what you do with languages, Chen. You don't just translate, you transform." Graduation from the program was a quiet affair. No families, no ceremony, just individual meetings with senior officials who explained our assignments. Mine was unexpected. Instead of being deployed overseas immediately, I was assigned to a domestic intelligence unit focused on international communications intercepts. For 3 years, I worked in a secure facility outside Washington, analyzing communications in multiple languages, identifying patterns that monolingual analysts missed, and providing cultural context for intelligence assessments. It was fascinating work, but it felt removed from the field applications I'd trained for. My family knew almost nothing about what I actually did. When I visited home for holidays, Dad would make the same tired jokes about my government translation job, while Mom would proudly tell neighbors about her daughter working in Washington. Neither really understood that Sarah Chen, the linguistics major from Denver, had effectively ceased to exist. I was Operative Phoenix now, and Phoenix lived in the shadows between languages, cultures, and worlds that ordinary people never glimpsed. The assignment that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was reviewing intercepted communications from Eastern European sources when Director Hamilton summoned me to his office, something that had never happened in my 3 years at the facility. Hamilton was a man who spoke in measured sentences, each word carefully chosen. "Phoenix," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk, "we have a situation developing that requires your specific skill set." He slid a thick folder across the mahogany surface. Inside were photographs, transcripts, and intelligence reports detailing a sophisticated international operation. A network of individuals had been moving large sums of money through multiple countries, using a complex web of shell companies and encrypted communications. What made this case unique wasn't the money laundering itself. It was the linguistic component. The suspects are communicating using a code that incorporates elements from 7 different languages, Hamilton explained. They're not just switching between languages randomly. They're creating hybrid sentences that blend grammatical structures, cultural references, and idiomatic expressions in ways that make standard translation software useless. I studied the communication samples. The patterns were incredibly sophisticated. A single message might begin with Russian syntax, incorporate Arabic numerical systems, use German compound word structures, embed French cultural references, include Mandarin tonal implications, utilize Spanish verb conjugations, and conclude with English slang, all within the same paragraph. Our best linguists have been working on this for 8 months, Hamilton continued. They can identify the component languages, but they can't decode the meaning. The cultural context shifts too rapidly, and the cognitive load of processing 7 linguistic frameworks simultaneously is beyond their capabilities. I read through more samples, feeling my brain automatically switching between linguistic modes. The messages weren't just multilingual, they were metalinguistic. The authors weren't simply using different languages, they were thinking in the spaces between languages, creating meaning in the cultural gaps that monolingual speakers couldn't access. How extensive is this network? I asked, still processing the complexity of what I was seeing. We believe it spans at least 12 countries across 4 continents. The financial component involves approximately $40 million in suspicious transactions. But that's not what has us concerned. Hamilton's expression darkened. 3 weeks ago, we intercepted communications suggesting they're planning something for next month. We don't know what, where, or who's involved. All we know is that the timeline is accelerating, and conventional intelligence methods aren't working. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The assignment was unlike anything in my training. Instead of analyzing communications from a secure facility, I would be deployed to track down key members of this network in person. My ability to seamlessly switch between linguistic and cultural contexts would allow me to infiltrate conversations, gather intelligence, and piece together the larger picture. This is deep cover work, Phoenix. You'll be operating with minimal backup, often in situations where a single linguistic misstep could compromise your safety. Hamilton studied my face carefully. Are you prepared for that level of responsibility? I thought about my father's dismissive comments, his certainty that my languages would never amount to anything meaningful. Here was the government asking me to use those same skills to potentially prevent an international incident. I'm ready, sir. The first lead took me to Montreal, where financial records indicated one of the shell companies had significant activity. The contact was a man named Viktor Petrov, who operated an import-export business that served as a front for money transfers. Getting close to him required becoming someone completely different. I spent 2 days establishing my cover identity, Elena Dubois, a freelance interpreter specializing in Eastern European business transactions. The background was solid. I had documentation, references, and a work history that would withstand casual investigation. More importantly, I had the linguistic and cultural knowledge to make the persona believable. Petrov's office was in Old Montreal, a narrow space above a restaurant that smelled perpetually of cabbage and cigarettes. When I arrived for our arranged meeting, he was on the phone speaking rapid Russian peppered with French business terms. Exactly the kind of linguistic hybrid the network had been using in their communications. Mademoiselle Dubois, he said in accented English after ending his call, I understand you have experience with complex international transactions. Our conversation began in English, but I let slip a few Russian phrases when discussing business practices. His eyes sharpened with interest. Within minutes, we were speaking a fluid mixture of Russian, French, and English that felt natural to both of us, but would have been incomprehensible to most observers. Petrov was cautious, but my linguistic authenticity gradually earned his trust. I wasn't just someone who had studied these languages in school. I was someone who understood the cultural nuances that made certain phrases appropriate in business contexts, the subtle differences between Russian formality and French politeness, the way English directness could be softened with Slavic indirectness. Over the course of 3 meetings, I learned that Petrov was a middle-tier operator in a much larger organization. The network used their multilingual communications not just for security, but for efficiency. Members could convey complex cultural and operational information in ways that were both faster and more precise than single-language communications. When I tell someone in Moscow about a deal using Arabic numerical concepts embedded in German sentence structure, Petrov explained during our 3rd meeting, they understand not just the financial details, but the cultural context of the parties involved, the appropriate level of formality for negotiations, and the probable timeline based on regional business practices. One sentence carries information that would require paragraphs in any single language. The revelation was stunning. This wasn't just a criminal network using languages for secrecy. It was a group of individuals who had developed a new form of human communication, one that leveraged multiple cultural frameworks simultaneously to create unprecedented efficiency in complex international operations. But Petrov was just the beginning. He inadvertently revealed that the network's coordination hub was in Berlin, where a woman known only as the translator managed communications for the entire operation. If I wanted to understand what they were planning, I needed to get to Berlin. The transition from Montreal to Berlin required another complete identity shift. Elena Dubois was too closely associated with Petrov's circle to be useful in Germany. Instead, I became Dr. Sarah Hoffman, a freelance cultural consultant specializing in international business communications. Berlin's International Business District was a maze of glass towers and converted historical buildings where dozens of languages could be heard within a single city block. Finding the translator required patience and careful observation. I spent days in coffee shops, business centers, and networking events, listening for the distinctive multilingual patterns I'd learned to recognize. The breakthrough came at a conference on international trade regulations. During a break between sessions, I overheard a conversation between 2 attendees that used the exact linguistic hybrid structure from the intercepted communications. I followed them to a nearby restaurant where they met with a woman who seemed to effortlessly coordinate conversations in multiple languages simultaneously. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 30s, with an unremarkable appearance that would allow her to blend into almost any cultural context. But when she spoke, switching fluidly between languages not just within conversations but within individual sentences, I realized I was observing someone with abilities that matched or possibly exceeded my own. Getting an introduction required careful planning. I engineered a situation where my expertise in cultural communication would be valuable to her network, positioning myself as a consultant who could help streamline their already sophisticated systems. The approach worked. Within a week, I was invited to a private meeting in a converted warehouse in East Berlin, where I met the woman I had been tracking. She introduced herself simply as Anna, and our first conversation lasted 4 hours. Anna's linguistic abilities were extraordinary, but what impressed me more was her strategic thinking. She had identified the limitations of single-language communication in international operations and developed systematic approaches to overcome them. The network wasn't just using multiple languages. They were pioneering new forms of cross-cultural intelligence. Most people think in one language at a time, Anna explained as we discussed communication theory. Even polyglots typically switch between linguistic frameworks rather than combining them. But when you can think simultaneously in multiple cultural contexts, you access information and insights that no single perspective can provide. As our professional relationship developed, I began to understand the true scope of what the network had accomplished. They weren't just moving money. They were creating new models for international collaboration that transcended traditional cultural and linguistic barriers. But I still didn't know what they were planning for the following month, and my time was running out. The breakthrough came during my 4th week in Berlin, when Anna invited me to observe what she called a coordination session. In a secure room beneath the warehouse, 12 individuals from different countries gathered around a circular table, equipped with advanced communication technology. What I witnessed challenged everything I thought I knew about international collaboration. The session began with each participant providing updates in their native language, but as the discussion progressed, something remarkable happened. The conversation evolved into a fluid, multilingual dialogue, where ideas flowed seamlessly across linguistic boundaries. A man from Tokyo would begin a thought in Japanese, incorporate German technical terminology, and conclude with Arabic numerical concepts. A woman from Sao Paulo would respond using Portuguese syntax filled with Mandarin organizational principles and Russian analytical frameworks. The efficiency was breathtaking. Complex international logistics were being coordinated in real time, with a precision that conventional translation systems could never achieve. But as I listened more carefully, a disturbing pattern emerged. The logistics they were coordinating weren't just business operations. References to delivery schedules, package contents, and final destinations carried undertones that suggested something far more significant than simple import-export activities. Anna noticed my focused attention during the session. Afterward, she approached me with an unusual proposal. "Sarah," she said, using my cover identity's first name, "your understanding of cross-cultural communication dynamics is exceptional. We're approaching a critical phase of our operations, and we need someone with your specific expertise." She led me to a private office where detailed maps covered the walls, marked with locations across Europe, Asia, and North America. Red pins indicated completed operations, yellow pins showed current activities, and blue pins marked future targets. The scope was massive. Whatever this network was planning, it spanned continents. Traditional international coordination fails because each culture approaches problems differently, Anna explained, pointing to various marked locations. Russians prioritize systematic preparation. Germans focus on technical precision. Arabs emphasize relationship building. Chinese think in long-term strategic terms. Americans want immediate, practical results. She turned to face me directly. But what if you could combine all those approaches simultaneously? What if instead of choosing one cultural methodology, you could leverage the strengths of all of them? The question revealed the true sophistication of what I was observing. This wasn't just a criminal organization. It was a proof of concept for a new form of international operation that transcended traditional cultural limitations. The project we're completing next month will demonstrate capabilities that current international systems can't match, Anna continued. Coordinated activities across 7 countries executed simultaneously with precision that leverages each region's cultural strengths. My training kicked in. I needed more specific information, but pushing too hard would expose my real purpose. Instead, I approached from an academic angle. The linguistic coordination alone must be incredibly complex. How do you maintain operational security across so many cultural contexts? Anna smiled, apparently pleased by my technical interest. That's exactly why we need your expertise. Each culture has different concepts of information security, different approaches to confidentiality, different standards for trust verification. We've developed communication protocols that account for these variations, but we're reaching the limits of our current systems. She showed me encrypted communication logs that demonstrated the network's extraordinary capabilities. Messages contained multiple layers of meaning, with primary information conveyed through one linguistic framework while secondary data was embedded in cultural subtexts from completely different languages. A single paragraph might contain operational details in German technical language, timeline information embedded in Arabic cultural references, personnel assignments coded through Mandarin hierarchical structures, and contingency plans hidden in Russian idiomatic expressions. The cognitive complexity required to encode and decode such messages was staggering. Traditional intelligence agencies assign different specialists to handle different languages and cultures, Anna explained. But critical information gets lost in translation between specialists. When one person can process multiple cultural frameworks simultaneously, communication becomes exponentially more efficient. Quote, over the following days, Anna gradually revealed more details about their upcoming operation. The network had identified what they called cultural blind spots in international security systems, gaps created when different countries' security approaches failed to account for each other's cultural assumptions. American security focuses on technological solutions and individual accountability, Anna noted during one of our planning sessions. European systems emphasize bureaucratic processes and institutional oversight. Asian approaches prioritize collective responsibility and long-term stability. Each system is effective within its own cultural context, but they're vulnerable at the intersection points. The network's plan exploited these intersection vulnerabilities through coordinated activities that would appear routine within each individual cultural context, while achieving unprecedented results through their combination. Imagine, Anna said, financial transactions that appear completely normal to American banking systems, shipping manifests that satisfy European regulatory requirements, and cultural exchange programs that meet Asian diplomatic standards, all coordinated to achieve a single objective that none of the individual systems would recognize. The pieces were starting to come together, but I still didn't understand the ultimate goal. The network clearly had capabilities that transcended anything I'd encountered in government service, but their specific target remained unclear. The answer came during my final week in Berlin, when Anna brought me to meet the network's senior leadership. In a converted Cold War bunker beneath the city, I was introduced to Dr. Marcus Weber, a former professor of international relations, who had spent decades studying the failures of traditional diplomatic and intelligence systems. Sarah, Dr. Weber said in perfect English tinged with academic formality, Anna tells me you appreciate the theoretical implications of our work. Weber's office was lined with books in dozens of languages, academic papers on cross-cultural communication, and historical analyses of international cooperation failures. This wasn't the headquarters of a criminal organization. It was a research institute dedicated to revolutionizing how human societies collaborate across cultural boundaries. Every major international crisis of the past century has involved communication failures between cultures, Weber explained. Not language translation failures, cultural comprehension failures. When decision-makers can't truly understand how other cultures think, process information, and make decisions, cooperation becomes impossible. He gestured to a wall covered with historical timelines. World War I escalated due to cultural misunderstandings between European powers. The Cold War persisted because American and Soviet decision-makers couldn't comprehend each other's cultural frameworks. Current international tensions exist because no existing system can facilitate genuine cross-cultural understanding at the institutional level. Weber's vision was breathtaking in its scope. The network wasn't planning a criminal operation. They were preparing to demonstrate a new model for international cooperation that could potentially transform global relations. Next month's project will show world leaders what becomes possible when cultural boundaries become bridges instead of barriers, Weber continued. 7 countries, 7 different approaches to a common challenge, coordinated through genuine cross-cultural intelligence rather than conventional diplomatic translation. But as Weber described their plans in more detail, I realized the demonstration would involve unauthorized access to sensitive government systems across multiple countries. Even if their ultimate goals were beneficial, their methods would constitute serious international crimes. I was faced with an unprecedented dilemma. The network had developed capabilities that could genuinely advance human civilization, but they were planning to deploy those capabilities through actions that would violate international law and potentially destabilize existing security systems. My secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Director Hamilton. Status report required immediately. Timeline accelerating. The moment of decision was approaching, and I wasn't sure which side of this conflict deserved my loyalty. The secure meeting with Director Hamilton took place in a safe house outside Prague, neutral territory that wouldn't compromise my cover in Berlin. When I arrived at the designated location, Hamilton wasn't alone. Agent Rebecca Torres from the State Department and Dr. James Morrison from the National Security Council sat at a conference table covered with classified documents. Phoenix, Hamilton began without preamble, your intelligence reports have raised significant concerns at the highest levels of government. What you've discovered isn't just a criminal network. It's a potential threat to international security infrastructure. Dr. Morrison leaned forward, his expression grave. The capabilities you've described could fundamentally undermine existing diplomatic and intelligence systems. If this group can exploit cultural blind spots in security protocols across multiple countries simultaneously, they represent an unprecedented vulnerability. Agent Torres opened a thick file. We've been analyzing the financial transactions you've identified. The $40 million is just the visible portion. Our forensic accountants have traced connections to additional networks totaling over $200 million in suspicious activities across 18 countries. The numbers were staggering, but something about their presentation troubled me. Throughout my weeks with Weber's network, I'd seen no evidence of personal enrichment or traditional criminal motivations. The money seemed to flow entirely toward research, technology development, and operational expenses for their cross-cultural communication project. Director, I said carefully, my observations suggest this network's primary objectives aren't financial. They appear to be developing legitimate advances in international communication technology. Hamilton's expression hardened. Phoenix, regardless of their stated objectives, their methods involve unauthorized access to classified government systems. Intel suggests they're planning to demonstrate their capabilities by simultaneously penetrating security networks in 7 countries. The potential for catastrophic intelligence breaches is enormous. Dr. Morrison activated a secure tablet and showed me satellite imagery of government facilities across Europe, Asia, and North America. These locations have all experienced unusual network activity in the past month, activities that correlate directly with your target network's operational timeline. The evidence was compelling, but I found myself questioning the interpretation. During my time with Weber's group, I'd observed their technical capabilities firsthand. If they wanted to cause damage to government systems, they already possessed the tools to do so. Instead, they seemed focused on demonstrating positive applications of their cross-cultural intelligence methods. What if, I suggested, their plan isn't to compromise these systems, but to show how existing security gaps could be addressed through better cultural coordination? Agent Torres exchanged glances with Hamilton. Phoenix. That's an extremely optimistic interpretation of activities that violate multiple international security agreements. Even if their intentions are benign, the precedent they're setting is dangerous. If one group can exploit cultural blind spots in security systems, hostile nations or terrorist organizations could develop similar capabilities. The logic was sound, but it left me with an impossible choice. Weber's network had genuinely revolutionary potential for improving international cooperation, but their demonstration methods would inevitably be perceived as attacks on national security. The paranoia and defensive responses their actions would trigger could destroy any possibility of constructive dialogue about their innovations. What are my orders? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Hamilton slid a sealed envelope across the table. Operation termination. We need you to identify key network infrastructure, communication hubs, and leadership personnel. A coordinated international response will neutralize the threat before their demonstration can proceed. The envelope contained detailed instructions for sabotaging the network's operations from within. I was to provide real-time intelligence during their final preparations, allowing law enforcement agencies across 7 countries to simultaneously arrest key personnel and seize critical equipment. Timeline is critical, Dr. Morrison emphasized. Our intelligence indicates their demonstration is scheduled for next week. We need actionable information within 72 hours. I returned to Berlin with a heavy heart, carrying orders that would destroy what might be humanity's best opportunity for transcending cultural barriers in international relations. But I also understood the legitimate security concerns that drove those orders. Weber's network, regardless of their intentions, was operating outside legal frameworks and threatening established systems that, however flawed, maintained international stability. Anna greeted me enthusiastically when I arrived at the warehouse. Perfect timing, Sarah. We're entering the final coordination phase, and Dr. Weber specifically requested your input on the cultural integration protocols. Quote, the next 48 hours provided an intensive glimpse into the network's true capabilities. Their preparation involved not just technical coordination, but deep cultural analysis of how different societies would interpret and respond to their demonstration. The key, Weber explained during a strategy session, is presenting our capabilities in ways that each culture can understand and appreciate. Americans need to see practical applications and measurable results. Europeans want systematic analysis and institutional frameworks. Asians require evidence of long-term stability and collective benefit. The demonstration plan was elegant in its complexity. Simultaneous activities across 7 countries would showcase different aspects of cross-cultural intelligence. Enhanced diplomatic communication in Switzerland, improved international trade coordination in Singapore, streamlined refugee assistance in Germany, more effective disaster response coordination in Japan, advanced conflict mediation in Canada, optimized international educational exchange in Australia, and revolutionary peacekeeping communication in Norway. Each component was designed to solve real problems while demonstrating the network's unique capabilities. The unauthorized access to government systems was intended to show how existing security gaps could be addressed, not to exploit those gaps for harmful purposes. Traditional intelligence sharing fails because each country processes information according to its own cultural assumptions, Anna explained as we reviewed final protocols. When threat assessments are filtered through single cultural perspectives, critical insights get lost. Our system processes threat data through multiple cultural frameworks simultaneously, identifying patterns that no single perspective could recognize. The demonstration would prove this by analyzing actual security threats using their multilingual, multicultural intelligence methods, then comparing their results to traditional single-culture analysis. The goal was to show government leaders how cross-cultural intelligence could enhance rather than threaten national security. But I knew that regardless of the network's intentions, their unauthorized access to classified systems would be perceived as an attack. The sophisticated cultural analysis that made their approach revolutionary would be interpreted as evidence of dangerous infiltration capabilities. My secure phone buzzed with an urgent message from Hamilton. Final go, no-go decision required in 12 hours. International task force standing by. I stared at the message, realizing that my response would determine not just the fate of Weber's network, but potentially the future of international cooperation itself. If I followed orders and provided the intelligence needed to shut down the operation, a genuinely transformative approach to cross-cultural communication would be destroyed. If I refused, I would be betraying my oath and potentially enabling activities that could destabilize international security systems. Weber found me in the communications center, studying the complex array of equipment that enabled their multilingual coordination capabilities. "Sarah," he said quietly, "you seem troubled by something." His perceptiveness shouldn't have surprised me. Someone who could read cultural subtexts across 7 different linguistic frameworks would certainly notice emotional distress in a single individual. "I'm concerned about how your demonstration will be received," I said honestly. "Even if your intentions are beneficial, the methods you're using will be interpreted as threats by existing security systems." Weber nodded thoughtfully. "That's the fundamental challenge we face. Revolutionary advances often appear threatening to established systems, even when they offer genuine improvements. The question is whether the potential benefits justify the risks of misunderstanding." He was giving me an opening to reveal my true identity and purpose, though he probably didn't realize it. The moment had arrived for the most critical decision of my career. The weight of Weber's words hung in the air as I made a decision that would change everything. Looking directly into his eyes, I spoke in a careful mixture of languages that only someone with his capabilities would fully understand. Russian directness combined with Arabic respectful formality and German precision. "Dr. Weber, I believe there's something you should know about who I really am." His expression shifted subtly, but he showed no surprise. Instead, he responded in the same multilingual pattern, indicating he'd suspected my true purpose for some time. "Agent Chen, I wondered when you would choose to trust us with your real identity." The revelation that he knew caught me off guard, but it also provided an unexpected opportunity. "How long have you known?" Quote, Weber gestured for me to follow him to his private office, where he activated sophisticated counter-surveillance equipment before responding. "Your linguistic abilities are genuine, but your cultural adaptation patterns showed signs of formal training rather than natural development. Someone with your skills working as a freelance consultant was improbable. He pulled up a file on his secure computer, a file that contained more information about my background than should have been accessible to any civilian organization. Operative Phoenix, Georgetown University, recruited through Professor Catherine Walsh, trained at Quantico. Your psychological profile indicates someone who values human cooperation over institutional loyalty when the two conflict. The depth of his intelligence was staggering. Weber's network hadn't just developed revolutionary communication capabilities. They'd created information-gathering systems that rivaled government agencies. Dr. Weber, I said, abandoning all pretense, I'm under orders to provide intelligence that will allow international law enforcement to shut down your operation within the next 12 hours. Instead of anger or alarm, Weber showed what appeared to be relief. I'm grateful you chose honesty over deception. That decision tells me more about your character than months of observation could have revealed. He activated another screen, showing real-time communications from government agencies across multiple countries. I watched in amazement as encrypted messages between the FBI, Interpol, German Federal Police, and other international agencies scrolled past in multiple languages. We've been monitoring the task force preparations for the past week, Weber explained calmly. Your government's response is exactly what we anticipated. Traditional security systems perceive innovation as threat, cooperation as vulnerability, and cultural understanding as potential exploitation. The monitoring capability was both impressive and deeply concerning. If Weber's network could intercept classified communications between international law enforcement agencies, their potential for both beneficial and harmful applications was even greater than I'd realized. This is precisely why our demonstration is necessary, Weber continued. Current international security systems are so focused on preventing cooperation that they can't recognize genuine advances in human collaboration. Your orders to terminate our operation prove that existing institutions will actively resist improvements to international understanding. He turned to face me directly. Agent Chen, you now have access to information that your superiors don't possess. You know our actual objectives, you've observed our capabilities firsthand, and you understand the positive potential of what we're attempting. The question is whether you'll choose institutional loyalty or human progress. The moral complexity was overwhelming. Weber was asking me to commit treason against my own government, but he was also offering the possibility of advancing human civilization in ways that could prevent future international conflicts. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Weber activated a presentation that outlined 3 potential scenarios. The first showed the consequences of proceeding with the government's termination plan. The network would be destroyed, their research confiscated, and any possibility of legitimate development of cross-cultural intelligence capabilities would be set back by decades. The second scenario involved the network proceeding with their demonstration despite government interference. The resulting confrontation would create international incidents, damage diplomatic relations, and likely result in new restrictions on cross-cultural communication research. The third scenario was the one Weber was proposing to me. Instead of choosing between institutional loyalty and human progress, we create a bridge between them. You provide your government with accurate intelligence about our capabilities and objectives, but you also help us present our demonstration in ways that existing security systems can understand and appreciate. The proposal was audacious. Weber wanted me to become a genuine double agent, working simultaneously for government security and human advancement. The risks were enormous. If either side discovered my dual loyalty, I would face prosecution for treason and the complete destruction of everything I'd worked to achieve. The key, Weber explained, is timing and presentation. If we can show government leaders the positive applications of our capabilities before they perceive them as threats, we might be able to transform potential conflict into productive collaboration. He showed me modified demonstration plans that would achieve the same objectives while addressing legitimate security concerns. Instead of unauthorized access to classified systems, the network would work with government representatives to analyze unclassified but complex international communication challenges. Imagine, Weber said, if your director Hamilton could observe our cross-cultural intelligence methods being used to solve actual diplomatic problems. If he could see how cultural blind spots in current security systems could be addressed through cooperation rather than confrontation. The modified approach was brilliant, but it required unprecedented trust between traditional security systems and innovative research networks. Such trust would only be possible if someone credible to both sides could facilitate initial contact. Weber was asking me to become that bridge. The risks to you personally would be substantial, Weber acknowledged. You would need to convince your superiors to delay the termination operation, while simultaneously ensuring our demonstration proceeds in ways that don't trigger defensive responses. I thought about my father's dismissive comments about my languages being useless in the real world. Here was an opportunity to prove that multilingual, multicultural understanding could literally change the world, but only if I was willing to risk everything I'd built in government service. Dr. Weber, if I agree to this, I need guarantees that your network will operate within legal frameworks and respect national security requirements. Weber nodded seriously. Absolutely. Our objective is to advance human cooperation, not to undermine legitimate security interests. We want to work with government systems, not against them. He showed me detailed protocols the network had developed for transparent cooperation with security agencies. Their monitoring of government communications wasn't intended for espionage. It was designed to understand how existing systems operated so that improvements could be integrated rather than imposed. The ultimate goal, Weber explained, is to create official international programs that leverage cross-cultural intelligence for diplomatic advancement. Your role would be to facilitate the transition from unofficial research to legitimate government cooperation. My secure phone buzzed with another urgent message from Hamilton. The International Task Force was requesting final confirmation for the termination operation. I had less than 6 hours to make a decision that would determine not just my own future, but potentially the future of international relations. Weber sensed my internal struggle. Agent Chen, I understand the magnitude of what I'm asking, but consider this. Your unique position gives you the power to prevent a conflict that could set back international cooperation for generations. You could be the person who proves that cultural understanding is humanity's greatest security asset, not its greatest vulnerability. The weight of the decision was crushing, but as I looked around Weber's office filled with research from dozens of cultures and languages, I realized that this moment represented everything my mother had tried to teach me about the power of multilingual understanding. The question wasn't whether I was willing to risk my career for human progress. The question was whether I had the courage to use my unique abilities to build bridges instead of walls. Standing in Weber's office with my secure phone vibrating insistently, I made the most dangerous decision of my life. Instead of responding to Hamilton's message, I powered down the device and looked Weber directly in the eyes. I'm going to do something that will either save both our causes or destroy us all, I said. But I need you to trust me completely for the next 4 hours. Weber's expression remained calm, but I could see the intensity of his focus. What do you need? Access to your most secure communication system. I'm going to contact my director and arrange an emergency meeting, but I'm going to do it on terms that protect your operation while addressing his security concerns. What I was planning violated every protocol I'd ever learned, but it was the only path I could see toward preventing a catastrophe that would benefit no one. Using Weber's encrypted communication array, I composed a message that would either end my career or revolutionize international intelligence cooperation. The message I sent to Hamilton was brief but carefully crafted. Phoenix requesting immediate secure video conference. Have discovered critical intelligence that requires director-level authorization before proceeding with termination protocols. Network capabilities exceed all previous assessments. Recommend delay of enforcement action pending strategic evaluation. Hamilton's response came within minutes. Phoenix, explain your status immediately. Task force coordination cannot be delayed without extraordinary justification. Through Weber's system, I initiated a secure video connection that would allow Hamilton to see and hear me while protecting the location and details of my surroundings. When Hamilton's face appeared on the screen, his expression was a mixture of concern and barely controlled anger. Agent Chen, you have been incommunicado for 8 hours beyond your scheduled check-in. Explain your situation. I took a deep breath and began the most important briefing of my career. Director, the network we've been tracking isn't just a criminal organization with sophisticated communication capabilities. They're a research group that has developed revolutionary advances in cross-cultural intelligence with profound implications for national security. Hamilton's expression darkened. Phoenix, your mission parameters were clear. Provide actionable intelligence for network termination, not strategic analysis of enemy capabilities. Sir, with respect, they're not enemies. They're potential allies whose capabilities could enhance our own security rather than threaten it. I activated Weber's presentation system, sharing carefully selected information that demonstrated the network's positive applications without revealing sensitive operational details. What you're seeing, I continued, are communication and analysis methods that could transform how we handle international intelligence cooperation. Instead of relying on imperfect translation between agencies, we could develop systems that process information through multiple cultural frameworks simultaneously. Hamilton studied the data with professional skepticism, but I could see his analytical mind processing the implications. Agent Chen, even if these capabilities have potential applications, the methods being used to develop them involve unauthorized access to classified systems across multiple countries. That's exactly why I'm requesting this meeting, sir. The network leadership has indicated willingness to transition from unofficial research to legitimate government cooperation, but only if they can demonstrate their capabilities without being perceived as threats. Weber, who had been listening from outside the camera's range, stepped forward into view. Hamilton's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon before he realized the absurdity of the gesture in a video conference. Director Hamilton, Weber said in fluent English with a slight academic accent, I am Dr. Marcus Weber, and I believe Agent Chen has accurately represented both our capabilities and our intentions. Hamilton's training took over as he assessed this unexpected direct contact with his primary target. Dr. Weber, you are currently the subject of an international law enforcement operation. Any statements you make may be used in legal proceedings against you. Weber smiled calmly. Director, I understand your position completely, but I believe you'll find that our objectives align more closely than you might expect. We want to enhance international security cooperation, not undermine it. For the next 20 minutes, Weber provided Hamilton with a demonstration of the network's capabilities that was both impressive and carefully controlled. Using unclassified but complex international communication samples, he showed how cross-cultural intelligence methods could identify patterns and insights that traditional single-language analysis would miss. The techniques we've developed, Weber explained, could revolutionize how intelligence agencies share information across cultural boundaries. Instead of losing critical context in translation, multinational operations could maintain full cultural understanding throughout the communication chain. Hamilton's expression gradually shifted from suspicion to professional interest. The demonstration was revealing capabilities that could genuinely advance American intelligence operations while improving international cooperation. Dr. Weber, Hamilton said finally, assuming your stated intentions are genuine, what are you proposing? Weber glanced at me before responding. Agent Chen has suggested a path that could serve both our interests. Instead of proceeding with our planned demonstration through unauthorized access to classified systems, we propose conducting the same demonstration through official channels with appropriate government oversight. The proposal was elegant in its simplicity. The network would provide their full cooperation to a joint international task force, sharing their research and methods in exchange for legitimate opportunities to prove their capabilities. The demonstration would proceed, but with government representatives observing and evaluating rather than law enforcement preparing to intervene. The risks to you would be substantial, Hamilton noted. If your capabilities prove less beneficial than claimed, or if any security breaches occur during the demonstration, you would face prosecution under multiple international legal frameworks. Weber nodded seriously. We accept those risks because we believe in the value of what we've developed, but we need assurance that genuine cooperation will be met with genuine consideration, not predetermined rejection. Hamilton looked directly at me through the video connection. Agent Chen, You're requesting that I delay a coordinated international operation based on the recommendation of an agent who has been operating without authorization for 8 hours. Sir, I replied, I'm requesting that you consider the possibility that terminating this network would eliminate capabilities that could advance American security interests for decades to come. Hamilton was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing factors I couldn't see. I'll need to consult with higher authorities before making any changes to current operation parameters. Director, Weber interjected, we understand the complexity of your position. To demonstrate our good faith, we're prepared to provide immediate access to our research data and to submit to any security protocols you deem necessary during the evaluation period. It was an extraordinary offer. The network was essentially volunteering to surrender their operational security in exchange for the opportunity to prove their value as allies rather than adversaries. Hamilton's response would determine whether my gamble had succeeded or whether I had just destroyed both my career and Weber's revolutionary research. Part 7. Final. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Hamilton spoke again. Dr. Weber. Agent Chen. I'm going to make a decision that goes against every protocol in my operational manual. You have 72 hours to prove your claims under full government supervision. Relief flooded through me, but Weber maintained his composed demeanor. Director, we accept your terms completely. What do you need from us to begin the evaluation process? Hamilton's response was swift and professional. Within 6 hours, I need complete personnel files for your network, detailed technical specifications for your communication systems, and a comprehensive proposal for how your capabilities could be integrated into existing international security frameworks. Quote, the next 3 days transformed from a potential catastrophe into the most intensive collaboration I'd ever witnessed. Government representatives from 7 countries arrived in Berlin to observe Weber's network in action. The demonstration they conducted was nothing short of revolutionary. Using a simulated international crisis scenario provided by the Pentagon, Weber's team coordinated response efforts across multiple countries in real time. Their multilingual, multicultural approach identified solutions that conventional methods had missed entirely. Communication barriers that typically delayed international cooperation for days were resolved in minutes. Agent Torres, who had flown in from Washington, observed with barely concealed amazement as the network processed intelligence in Russian, analyzed cultural implications in Arabic, coordinated logistics in German, and presented conclusions in English, all simultaneously and with perfect contextual accuracy. Agent Chen, she whispered during one particularly impressive demonstration, this could change everything about how we handle international operations. Dr. Morrison from the National Security Council was equally impressed. The network's ability to process threat assessments through multiple cultural lenses revealed patterns that American analysts working alone would never have detected. But the most significant moment came when Hamilton received a secure call from the Pentagon on the second day of evaluations. After a brief, private conversation, he approached Weber with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of respect and barely contained excitement. Dr. Weber, Hamilton said, I've just been authorized to discuss potential official integration of your network's capabilities into U.S. intelligence operations. The formal negotiations that followed were complex beyond anything I could have imagined. Weber's network didn't just possess revolutionary communication capabilities, they had developed an entirely new approach to international intelligence that could reshape global security cooperation. 6 months later, I found myself back in Denver for Christmas dinner, but everything had changed. The secure landline in my apartment now rang regularly with calls requesting Operative Phoenix for consultation on international intelligence matters. My father sat across the dinner table, still looking skeptical despite the news articles about the new International Cultural Intelligence Initiative that had been featured on every major network. Mom beamed with pride as she explained to relatives how her daughter had become the lead coordinator for a revolutionary government program. So, Dad said finally, cutting through Mom's enthusiastic descriptions, this government job of yours, it's actually important? I smiled, thinking about the classified briefings I couldn't share, the international crises we'd already helped resolve, and the new training programs being developed to teach cross-cultural intelligence to the next generation of operatives. Dad, I said, switching effortlessly between English and Spanish as our Mexican-American neighbors joined the conversation, then adding French phrases as Mom's colleague from the university arrived. Remember when you said my 7 languages would only get me a job asking people if they wanted peanuts or pretzels? He nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable as he realized where this was heading. Last week, those same 7 languages helped prevent an international incident between 3 countries that could have affected global shipping for months. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. The Pentagon now has a code name for me specifically because of skills you thought were useless. The room fell silent except for the soft sound of multiple conversations continuing in different languages around our dinner table. A perfect microcosm of the world I now help navigate professionally. Dad's expression shifted slowly from skepticism to something approaching awe. Sarah, what exactly do you do for the government? I thought about Weber's network, now operating as an official international research institute. I thought about the crisis communications we'd streamlined, the diplomatic misunderstandings we'd prevented, and the new frameworks for cross-cultural cooperation that were being implemented across multiple agencies. I build bridges, Dad, between cultures, between countries, between ways of thinking that most people assume can never connect. I gestured around our multilingual dinner table. Everything Mom taught me about languages wasn't just about words. It was about understanding how different people see the world. The secure phone in my jacket buzzed with an encrypted message. Another international situation requiring cross-cultural intelligence. Another opportunity to prove that linguistic diversity was one of humanity's greatest strengths rather than a barrier to overcome. Dad stared at me for a long moment, then slowly shook his head. 7 languages, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. All this time, I thought. I never understood what you were really learning. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes bright with tears of pride. She was learning to speak for the world, Robert. She was learning to help people understand each other. As I prepared to leave dinner early to respond to the Pentagon's call, Dad stood up and did something he'd never done before. He hugged me, and in that embrace I felt years of misunderstanding finally dissolving. Sarah, he said quietly, I'm sorry I couldn't see what you were building. Your mother was right. Those languages of yours, they're not just words, are they? I smiled, thinking about Weber's revolutionary research, about the international cooperation we were fostering, about the bridges we were building between cultures that had been separated by centuries of misunderstanding. No, Dad, they're the future. The phone rang again, and this time it wasn't just the Pentagon calling Operative Phoenix. It was the world, asking me to help it understand itself. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.